Welcome, everyone. So happy to be here with another Peapodcast. We are going to play a short intro. I just have to find where it's at. And then we will begin.
Welcome to the Peapod. And just like the peas in a peapod, each human is here to have experiences that will contribute to the growth of all. Here at the Peapod, we will examine some of these experiences and glean the lessons learned, the truth uncovered, and come to a deeper understanding through our sharing. So grab your popcorn, get comfortable, maybe even a paper and pen, and get ready for an amazing time with your hostess, Terry Angel, a woman on a mission to bring change, especially in the arena of peace, into our world. And here she is.
Thank you so much, Jim, for that introduction. And welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Peapod. This came about in meditation when the angels told me to start up a podcast this year. And the Peapod idea actually came from the angels as well, because the way they explained it is that we're all like peas in a pea pod. We're all the same. We're all alike. And we're fed by that same source energy. Therefore, we are part of the oneness. The topic today is love. Agape love comes from the Greek word agape, which refers to the unconditional form of loving. You can call it a way of love. Agape goes beyond emotions to the extent of seeking the best for others. Paulo Coelho says agape is total love. Whoever knows and experiences agape learns that nothing else in the world is important, just love. And Stephen Kendrick says the only way love can last a lifetime is if it's unconditional. The truth is, this love is not determined by the one being loved, but rather by the one choosing to love. I am so fortunate to have these two men with me today. Harold Becker, the founder of the Love Foundation, and I've actually met Harold and been able to hug him. And Harold, I am so happy you're here. Welcome to the Peapod.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And my friend Jim Mershon. And Jim has such a great sense of humor. I said, Jim, do you have a short bio that I can put up for people to know who you are? And he goes, I'm just a guy. I said, no, you're just an amazing guy. So welcome, Jim. Thank you. Here. So guys, we're talking about love. And this is the day when people's thoughts turn to romantic love, usually on Valentine's Day. And I know there's a real history behind all that tradition. But I'd like to take this to a different angle and talk about that unconditional love and what that looks like and what it feels like even. So I'm just going to open it up for the two of you and just share from your heart.
Go, Jim, it's all yours.
Wow. You're so generous. Thank you. Well, I've been thinking about this for, as long as you brought up doing this, and it's what an incredibly large, all-encompassing subject. I mean, how to delve into it. It's this, and I had to look up agape, by the way. So thank you for a little education. I appreciate that. But just the enormity of the subject is a little intimidating. it's hard to delve into it, really.
Then I'll jump in and say I've been delving into it for over 30 years. So
right.
For me, the unconditional, I use the unconditional love aspect because my discovery was it is all about love. And, back in the 80s, former banker, master's degree business, all that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, there's more to life. And my kind of practical, pragmatic self wanted to kind of understand what life is about. And then in that exploration, very quickly, this common theme, love, just emanated from every source, every text, everything that I touch seemed to have a core message of love. And I'm thinking, well, if the core message is love, that's what the master teachers, numerous master teachers have all talked about, then there's something in this piece. Let's focus and magnify upon it. And I think because of my practical, pragmatic approach, my desire to kind of make it understandable for me, I kind of stuck with the unconditional love and use that phrase, those two words, which are, double negatives and all that good stuff, but they are indicative of at least American-centric, Western-centric viewpoint. And then I purposely, because I didn't have a strong religious connection, very free flowing, my parents allowed us to explore what we wanted to. I found as I explored the love piece that I wanted to just discover it as, what does it mean in my daily life? And that has just kind of blossomed over literally, now over 3 decades of just focusing on every moment, every day that I can possibly entertain the idea of how is this unconditional love without, limiting it to even religious connotations or social constructs, just kind of always looking at it as an open-ended aspect. And interestingly enough, my definition actually came out as I was exploring how do you describe unconditional love. My definition is it's an unlimited way of being, recognizing that we're in this moment. Every moment is a new beginning. So this is the moment we are physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually connected, which is why a deep breath is always a beautiful place to bring us back to center. And then from that is realizing that as creator beings, where we have thoughts and feelings and we create our reality as a result of those thoughts and feelings, then truly love must be an unlimited way of being. If it's unconditional, there are no limits. And if it's a way of being, it must be an unlimited way of being. So my exploration kind of expanded into how do I live my own personal life from an unlimited fashion, moment by moment, day by day, year by year. And that has been just kind of, so contrary to what I had been doing and my trajectory and my pathway into this whole, exploration of what does love mean for me, because I'm with me every moment of the day. So I best be knowing who I am first and foremost, because the reality that is out there is simply a reflection of the reality that is in here. And so for me, as I jumped in there, it was like, I have as Terry knows, a great passion for the whole concept of agape love, divine love, dog love, God love, unconditional love. So that's my introduction to it.
That's fantastic, and I thank you for jumping in as I was struggling, and I will kind of take your lead as far as my journey. I've really only come to this realization of what love is in my life very recently. In fact, I can say shortly before the time I met Terry. And a lot of the information that I'm getting is, from what I hear from other people. And a few years back, I became a student of Dolores Cannon. Had never heard of her before, and just sort of fell into some of her videos or books, and gotten involved with her whole QHHT stuff as well. And I was going through a very interesting situation just before I met Terry, who she and our other friend Jean helped me out with. And it was at that time where fear was a big part of my life. And I heard Dolores Cannon talk about fear is an illusion. The only truth is love. And that just kind of, I'm like, oh, come on. What? It kind of blew my mind, but I'm like, geez, here's someone who clearly has many, many years of getting information about this stuff. I don't doubt it, but boy, I sure don't get it. But I started delving into the idea of love. And when those fear things came in front of my face, I let them go and aimed love at them, and they shrank, and in some cases turned into love coming back. It was just an amazing experience, and very new. So it's still, I'm coming from, I remember as a young man, love. Yeah, I loved mom. I loved my mom. That was okay. You could do that. But, my buddies, if somebody had suggested to me, well, you love your buddies. Whoa. No, those are my buddies. I can't love them. That's, it's a lot of years of that kind of programming to now fully understand that love is everything. That is the only truth. Another very interesting concept, we're in this world of duality, of hot and cold, light and dark, but love itself has no opposite. It's like the one singularity in our existence, which again was a profound thought for me to grapple with, but makes a lot of sense the more I think about it. And as I experience love, try to be more loving, just life has only gotten more fulfilling, more success, and helped me to so appreciate the people in my lives, people who I used to they just annoyed me to no end. But, little by little, as I would open myself up and see them as just, other people and start putting love out there, maybe right now they're annoying me a little bit, but, that's a really cool person right there. I can really now see what an amazing person, even with the stuff I used to think annoyed me. So that's sort of the, I guess, stepping stones of learning about love that I've been going through, which may resonate with other people, I would imagine.
Oh,
I think Terry and I are kind of doing a virtual high five through all of this.
I know. Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think you're alone in that struggle at all.
Right.
Right. And, it took me a whole lifetime to learn what love was, and kept looking, like, okay, that must be love. And then it's not. And so it is one of those things that until you can really experience that unconditional love,
right.
Love is anything but. And I think it's interesting. I studied with Greg Braden to learn the heart-brain coherence. And Greg taught it so beautifully, but he said that they don't, when they have you do the heart, you're both familiar, I think, with the heart-brain. When you do the feeling part, when you're in your heart and they tell you to feel, they don't use the word love. And they said they do that on purpose. They don't say feel love because love has so many different connotations to so many people. And there may be people that had a really bad experience with a certain type of love, like romantic love. And so that's the last thing they want to have, that thought going into their heart. So they use terms like compassion and care. And to me, it's all the same. Compassion, you're coming from a love place in your heart when you're giving compassionate thoughts to somebody.
Mm.
One of my mentors, masters, goddess of compassion, Kuan Yin, one day in meditation, I heard, love heals. What do you guys think about that?
I would actually say love is health and well-being. Again, to remove the polarity of the duality is love just is, and our natural state just is. The only reason we suffer any dis-ease is because we're not at ease with ourselves. And that really comes from how we've gathered experiences, information, emotions, thoughts, feelings, everything from childhood on, and then formulated or somewhat taken upon other people's views of what life is supposed to be like, other people's fears, doubts, worries, concerns. Love really is that energetic. It's the nothingness and the everythingness. It's the trying to prove love. I mean, we can say we love our mother. We can say we love, our family, or we might love our job or whatever. But in reality, those are just vague markers that's not really indicating the true intrinsic love that we are. And I think that was the awakening for me, is that we are love. We're not seeking love. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. There were key pieces, like this moment is the only moment. What I have within, I give out. What I give out comes back to me. Everything was centered on self, and it's probably one of the biggest challenges for people that are not really aware of love as an integral essence of their beingness, is that they are only looking at it from external reference points. And they then take upon those definitions, when in reality, when you start to know that you are love, then you start to know that everybody's a spiritual being having a human experience. You start to see energetically the essence that everyone is a soul walking upon this planet, just having an adventure. It's as simple as that. And the unconditional love nature is how you allow that unconditional aspect to come forth, so you can let everybody be right where they're at. In dis-ease, in ease, in dis. It doesn't really matter at that point. You allow people be where they're at, because when you do that, you're seeing essentially their essence as love. And when you see and feel their essence as love, that light actually shines from that awareness. And that actually opens them up to see an aspect of themselves that they never saw before. If we see the polarity, the duality, the dis-ease, then we're actually adding upon that which is not true. And it takes some finessing of, when we explore this, I can say all three of us are dedicated to the idea of exploring love, because we are just now aware that this is what it's really all about. Things become more and more clear, and the awareness becomes more and more, I would say, obvious. Now, for somebody that maybe is tuning in for the first time to a podcast like this, and they're just beginning to hear agape love or unconditional love or love of anything, and they don't have necessarily the reference points, it might seem a bit too big a gap to say love heals, well, love is unconditional love, because there's atrocities abound, and there's so much evidence of that. And yet, if you go to the innate self, who we are as beings of love, the magic of trillions of cells doing trillions of things as we sit here and have this conversation. The magnificence of our own bodies should tell us that there has to be an aspect of love driving all of this, because we can't perform the things that are happening to make us have the experiences we're having. That I kind of relate everything to just that really practical aspect. It's very easy to realize who we are as a basic truth when we go beyond these terms and go beyond these definitions, because a lot of that is generational, millennial derivations of other people's interpretations, when in reality, right now, we can tap into the love. And when we do, we instantly heal, because we are instantly aligned with that which is health and well-being.
So well said. And I was revisiting today just the concept that we have access always to everything we ever need. But you sort of alluded to it a little bit ago, just being myself so close to just opening up to all of this stuff. I can still very much remember all that resistance I'm coming from. And yeah, not too long ago, I might have accidentally popped into here and like, what are these people talking about? This doesn't make any sense. That can't work. It was that resistance. I had no space. I was so resistant, and the dis-ease, and I didn't have room for love, and I didn't have really people around me. It didn't open up. I can see where it started for me was at work, where I had sort of just done my own thing, and in what I was doing, it worked very well. I was successful enough for what I was doing, but I was in my own little bubble, just plugging along, not even really realizing how miserable I was. And what changed it for me was being convinced to take on a role of responsibility. And now suddenly I'm responsible for other staff, for customers that come around. And it was suddenly having to think about others and being responsible for how their experiences were. I at least, took my job seriously enough that it was important that things worked for others. That was the big breaking point. There are other people in my life. I'm responsible, and we have to make things work for them. And that was when I first started seeing these people who always drove me nuts were just other people like me. And that those little things that drove me nuts were just so unimportant.
Yes.
And now I'm seeing wonderful, just human beings that I'm so grateful that I've now opened up to the experience of other people, and that I didn't know at the time that I had love for them. I didn't even have a word for it at that point.
I can relate. I can relate because the business world that I was working full-time in the business world while going to school full-time and working up through my master's degree. Of course, you get all the great theory in school and university, and then you go out in the working world simultaneously and like, oh, maybe not so much. And I think I just always had like you, I wouldn't have been able to say I had love because I had business education and knowledge there. I understood management on the top level. I really did. And as I ended up going into more and more management, moved myself up through management ranks, I understood where they were coming and how they had to see that bigger picture for a company. And at the same time, I saw the front end people who were interacting with the customers, and there was this massive gap, and I didn't understand the gap, and I didn't have a word for it either. I just felt like, wait a minute, there shouldn't be a gap because we're all in it together. So very similar to you, I had that kind of awakening, but it was a part of an awakening that eventually revealed itself as that love piece. Mm-hmm. And then also to me, I was essentially, I think you would understand this phrase, I finally realized I was doing everything right according to cultural constructs, family desires, intentions. I was following, I had the right suits, I had the right cars, I had the whatever, but I wasn't happy. And I didn't understand that I wasn't happy, or that happiness was actually even viable as part of the pathway. But I think as these transformations, transitions, this kind of awakening in the late 80s, which became kind of the catalyst of just walking away from all of it in 1990, it was because I was feeling that there had to be more to life than there had to be a reason why I was feeling this amongst this kind of plugged in human reality, especially American-centric, Western-centric. Mm. And in that exploration of walking away from it, I found a whole new dimension to life that I could not have actually ever thought was possible. In fact, my journey forward took me into like Terry writing books, doing TV, doing all kinds of things related to this subject, and then exploring and traveling and interacting with people. And now on a global basis, it's just phenomenal how that pathway that was straight and narrow, that seemed appropriate and right according to everybody else, was in fact the jump off point for me to go that much bigger and that much further.
That is amazing. That's wonderful. Yeah, I had thought that what I had been doing was just so easy and simple, and I didn't have to worry about anything. Not realizing how small my world was and what I was missing out there, what there really was to offer, really what life was really all about. I was missing it all. And again, thinking back, I can feel just that resistance. I had such little space available within me for anything to come in there for me to even notice. And again, the key was other people. I used to, this was an interesting thing. I just thought of this. Back in the 90s, just through crazy circumstances, I had the opportunity to travel in China. I was in the ski business, and I was doing skiing in China, spent a lot of time there, took lots and lots of pictures. I mean, probably thousands of pictures. And I'm back home showing some pictures to some of my friends, and someone said to me, like, this is so weird. None of your pictures have any people in them. I was like, wow, I never thought of that. I had no interest in having any people in my pictures. Later on, the last time I was there was like the late aughts. And now there were people in the pictures.
The progression, the evolution, Jim.
I think that's what all of us end up, we find part of why we do want to write books and go out there, and, we get excited because you realize there's so much more to life almost overnight. And that realization, which was always there, we just didn't see it. Yes. Always there. And I make those points because, all three of us can attest to having walked a pathway of common human joy and drudgery. And then you get this little glimmer of awareness, not an out of body, not a near death, not anything spectacular, nothing you can write home about, but you just get this awareness that opens up just a little bit more. And you start to realize there's so much more going on to the picture. And then that realization spurns this fire within our heart that says, I want to find out about all of it and in my relationship to all of it. And I think all of us can say, like anybody that would be fresh into this podcast and like, well, what the hell are they talking about? It's our joy and excitement that says, yes, all of that is fine. And you can still do all of that you do that we've always done. But when you have expansive awareness, if anything, it turns a black and white life to color life. It turns on the light, and it just makes everything much more understandable. Knowing, to understand that I'm a spiritual being having human experience. The moment I had that realization, I was like, oh, I don't need to go seeking anything. It's already here. And that's what we have on a trajectory as humanity has been seeking externally for something that is intrinsically with us all day, every day. And I think in a podcast like this, it's a joy to share our enthusiasm because we can't, everybody has to figure it out for themselves. And all of our pathways will be unique and beautiful and precious in their own way. And there's no right or wrong. There's no end goal. There's no more consciousness or less consciousness. It's just that when you have broader perspectives, life becomes much more tangible in its intangibility. You can't prove love. I mean, that's sort of like, you can't prove electricity. Your outlet is there, but really what's the mechanism? We can't actually even prove how our voices and our digital pictures are showing up in progress like this. I mean, we know it's happening. We just take it for granted. Well, this love being ever present, that understanding is a foundation of life, and loving myself unconditionally, which was a very early aspect of like, I need to, if I'm going to go forward in this pathway, I have to really become my own best friend, because I'm living with me. If I touch myself here, I'm feeling myself touching myself. But if somebody else touches me, we think we're feeling the other person touching us. In reality, we're just feeling our nerve endings, and we're interpreting that. So the journey is so selfish. Love makes it selfless. And then you become aware of everyone. And then our service to humanity takes on a whole new dimension, because we are simply acknowledging the innate love that's in everybody. We're not trying to change them, but we're actually shining a light so that they can find it for themselves. And then in that amplification process, it's like little light bulbs going off all around the world. It's, and when you can sit there with that level of perspective, it's like the mundane and treacherous and dramatic life people live, are like, that's not the only way. And I think that's the excitement that we want to convey in something like this, is that there's so much more. Don't limit yourself. Don't identify with your personality as your personality. Explore that innate ability to choose your thoughts and perspectives, and that you're actually creating it. And then, we're not going to get all of it right. I can say all of this is you're saying like, well, it sounds great, but in reality, what happens? Well, the reality of what happens is 30 years ago, if I really had a lot strong resistance to something, it could take me weeks or months to overcome that resistance. I can have a blissful day of awareness of myself in relationship to the planet, and then I can interact with a family member or somebody else or somebody in the street. And for that split second, it's enough resistance to just throw it right out the window. The difference now is that it's almost simultaneous that I return back to that natural loving state. That's what happens as you explore and expand, is it gets easier, even though it's always going to be present, that we live in a planet of duality and polarity. So we're going to encounter it. It's how we respond or react to it. And the more balanced and centered we are within ourselves, the less we will react from fear, doubt, worry, guilt, shame, the more we will react from love, and the more we will transform each and every experience to a higher level. What's not to get excited about that?
Right. Oh my gosh, Harold, thank you for putting that into a nice little package, because it was so understandable as you explained it. And I especially like where you went with, yes, we do live in a world where, there's going to be things that happen every day. What do we focus on? Do we focus on those things that are happening that's not so nice and pleasant? And that's a lot of times what I hear from people. It's like, well, are you just burying your head in the sand and just saying, oh, I'm just going to love everybody? I'm perfectly aware that there is the duality. I am aware that there are those that are not showing love. And I always, when I hear something that's happened, I always go to, okay, where am I not showing enough love? Where am I not showing love? If I'm seeing that in the world, is there a part of me that's holding something that's, wants to act out or not be that happy-go-lucky person that knows what real love is? So not that I'm taking on any guilt or shame or blame of it, but it's an opportunity, I think, for all of us to say, am I showing enough love and not really enough, but am I showing love into the world?
And that's a self-responsibility. It's a self-governance that we no longer blame people, places, and things outside ourselves. We accept responsibility for our thoughts and feelings. And even if we don't understand why an immediate activity or action or experience is in us, we at least can acknowledge the fact that in old momentum, we have thoughts and feelings and beliefs. We have, we're in this world. We are going to have our past, our present, and our future. And we can look at a global scale. And obviously, Terry, when you reached out and suggested this date, it's always a fun day to play with me, because I so understand the Valentine romantic love. But of course, through our nonprofit, the Love Foundation, we created Global Love Day on May 1st every year, which is our celebration of our humanity, which is our Universal Agape, Unconditional Love Day for all of our humanity. And both of them are totally appropriate. There's sensuality in our experience that is beautiful and precious in the romantic love, especially when coming from a self-awareness of self-love, because then we're not seeking others to complete us, but we're in fact enhancing ourselves and our relationship with significant others on a day like today. Well, then, in May 1st, we're doing that on a planetary scale, saying, let's celebrate ourselves as a humanity. Let's throw away the cultural divides, the barriers, the borders, the whatever traditions, whatever we think is there, and let's look at it on a planetary scale. So I always find it's fun because, Global Love Day to me is the other love day, because humanity knows the romantic love and it's precious in its own right. And then we go the next step, and it's really an example of what can happen as we expand our consciousness, because clearly Global Love Day was not part of my reality or anybody else's reality up till 20 years ago. And now it has a global imprint and a global footprint. And I only share that because that's what this pathway evolves. Like, I remember, Terry, when you took off your first time to begin your travels, and I knew, a single woman traversing the country, the social, cultural, the taboos, the fears, the worries, the doubts, that everybody else's fears could have become an enormous obstacle. And yet you persevered and you proved to yourself, I am that I am, and I'm having my own experience. And now you're on your third venture, and we followed every one of them and thinking, yeah, of course you would do this, because you're coming from your heart. You're not coming from the limitations of the head, the limitations of the logic, the limitations of the past. You're saying, I understand who I am. And for each of us, that realization is such a personal empowerment that is beyond words, beyond certification, beyond, we could be certified, I guess, depending on how other people want look at us, we could be certifiable. But there's just no real way to describe it other than through our passion and our compassion and our kindness and our expression, because I learned very early on, and it was a very helpful understanding, people were either going to prove me right or prove me wrong based on their perception of the material. And to this day, because we put out ideas, inspirations all the time with this. And, occasionally we'll come across one that's like, absolutely no, you're wrong on every level. And I get it. And I'm not here to convince anybody, because it is a personalized journey. And that's what's so beautiful about it, is because no one's actually asking us to be anything. We don't even have to ask ourselves to be something. We don't have to be in service. We don't have to love. We don't have to. And yet the very nature of this awakening and awareness, the expansion, brings out this understanding that is experienced, not taught. All these words we talk are beautiful, wonderful, great, lovely. But not one of these words we share, not even a hug can necessarily change a person's perspective, but life itself will. And what I think we all aim to do is to say, look, life has been changing us, continues to change us, continues to evolve us. And in doing so, we're here saying, come join the party, because as each person brings their light to the party, this planet does transform into a more peaceful, loving, appropriate orb that it was intended to be. And that people can see that there's possibility and hope when they only see hopelessness. And yet it is still individual. And it's not for us to change anybody, can't even change ourselves in that way, but life itself, through all of us, will provide that opportunity. I'm just getting slightly excited about the subject.
Well, that just makes so much sense. And I was, as you were talking, I just sort of, and in this whole conversation, when you were saying how this is our own journey, it's everyone's own journey. And I think of those people that crossed my path way back in my resistance, who were, giving me little hints, little
Absolutely.
cues, a little, and I can even think back and remember some of them, and just knowing that at the time they're like, oh, yeah, he's not even hearing, he's not getting it. But looking back, some of those people, I get that, oh, yes, that's, I remember so-and-so, they were trying to get through to me. That makes so much sense. I get it now. And those people in my sort of awakening and a tiny little bit of a better understanding, meeting people who reminded me so much of where I was. And I try giving them little cues, little hints, little tidbits, and just, yeah, they're not ready. So it's up to them,
Yeah.
I try. I remember one of the biggest ones, especially being Valentine's Day, a relationship. This is terrible to admit, but I think this may resonate with others. Like how I used to misinterpret what love was, and the relationship I had, and we were very loving to each other, but the one thing we always got stuck on was finances, and I goofed up on playing that check game, trying to pay bills, but the paycheck wasn't coming in for, I bounced a check, and we were having a little argument about it, and I was getting frustrated, like, well, I just don't have any. And I said, but honey, I love you. Like, so forgive me already, and let's move on. And God bless. Right. And she was like, I could see her, she was just exasperated, and she's like, that doesn't mean anything, just work, and she was trying to be nice. And I wish I could say that at that moment I got it, but it wasn't that moment. It was sometime later, like, oh,
yes, but you did get it. That's the important part.
Yes, eventually. But right, that was not, I was just using it as a tool. Well, I said I love you, so you've got to forgive me, and let's move on. And such a misinterpretation or understanding of what love was.
And that's really kind of the essence
I was given growing up.
And that's the essence of what's been on the planet. Is there's so much misinterpretation. I mean, in any one of the religions, you have countless, fractions that break off because of misinterpretation. And I think, I mentioned early on that the catalyst to the word love came in as a way of me just looking at all these areas that I'd never looked at. And one of the books that came across my path, because I didn't have a religious background, I thought, well, I should probably know something about this. It was Religions of Man. It was by Houston Smith. And it was a fairly thick enough book. But it covered the 5 major religions and a variety of then ancillary but still prominent religions. And, it was quite the tome. It was a lot of information. And I followed through it. I didn't really identify with anything, nothing, But what I did find is every major religion had one singular message, which was that of love. And when I put the book down, that was my realization, is like, well, love has been the message. I don't know why they're not getting it. They, whoever they are, an individual or on a billion person level. But I thought, I'm going to go explore this for myself, because clearly if it has been a timeless message that religions were supposedly built around, it must be an important facet of our journey. And I think because I was so detached from needing to find, because in my expansion, I have never followed anything. It has never been my calling. It's my exploration, and anything that I will share, I will only share if I've experienced it myself. And I understand from the knowing aspect that this is a mechanism that, has worked for me. Doesn't mean that there isn't profound, I look at some of the, Confucius said this and Socrates said that. I'm like, this message has been around for a really long time. And people eons before us have been saying almost identical things. So then my question evolved to like, why would the singular message of love on the planet, theoretically, at least, at the time there are 5 billion or 8 billion now, but, at least 7 out of 8 billion is ascribed to some religious energy, then why is this love piece so far out? And part of, back to the very initial title for this, the agape, one of the reasons why I chose, and I continue to choose not to use specific words like that, is because most people are inculcated, indoctrinated, dogmatically express that, love is something that they will never achieve. Unconditional love is not possible. Only God can love. Or your best friend, the dog, can love unconditionally. What is an interesting dog and God? You sit there and you say, well, that just can't make sense. So when I brought it back into myself and realized that, in Christian religious teachings, Jesus said, all this and more shall you do. Innately, he was saying, you have this if all of us are spiritual beings having a human experience, what would happen if we stopped seeking outside and we stopped looking at something that was a deity or deify a concept and actually brought it into our world and actually said, I'm going to practice this and see where it takes me. And, it's like fasting. The first few days don't feel so good. But in fact, what you're doing is you're giving your body a chance to actually release toxins. Well, when you fast from the dogmatic and the culturally held definitions, you get to start to define it for yourself. And that's why even in my very first book in 93, Unconditional Love as an Unlimited Way of Being became the foundation. In fact, the first book, as I was formulating the manuscript, I just sat down one day at a dining room table. We were living in Washington, D.C. area at the time, and I wrote out 7 areas that I had been exploring over the past 2-3 years in kind of the self-help genre. And the top of the list was unconditional love, because love was, concept. And in that, the other end of the list was choice. And I just realized that, actually, I would say I realized I had choice in my thoughts and feelings, and unconditional love was the overwhelming theme. And then these other aspects were in between. But I just looked at it and I thought, I have a choice in this. I can choose to love unconditionally, or I can choose not to. And that was such an empowerment moment for me, because for once in my life, I realized my life wasn't predicated on what other people, my expectations or my anticipations of other people love me if I did what they wanted me to do conditionally, so that they could be happy. In fact, needed to be me being happy, because only like in an airplane, when the oxygen mask comes down, you have to get the oxygen for yourself first. You have to love yourself first in order to be any help for anybody else. You have to understand health and well-being in order to be health and well-being for anybody else. So this is this paradox of selflessness, because when you selfishly take care of yourself, which most of humanity is diabolically opposed to, so they do drugs and drink and do all the other things to try to get them artificially there. When you actually do this, that selfish act of taking care of yourself becomes a selfless awareness, because you realize there is only one love on the planet. There's only one humanity on the planet. There is only one oneness within the galaxy, of galaxy, the cosmos. And all of a sudden you realize you're a part of it all. And then all of a sudden, all these teachings that have been around for eons make sense. You don't harm anything unless you harm yourself. It all makes sense, but I don't need these old structures to give me definitions if I can't take those definitions and put it into practical use and an experience for myself. And that's why I think I ended up, unbeknownst to me in 1990, I started Unfold a Path that says, I'm going to explore this and I will share what I come across as I go along. And in doing so, my hope was to help more. And then that evolved too, where it's like, I'm not here to even do that. Just by my presence on the planet, I can make a difference. And this is where, we now understand our presence can, in fact, if we're shining light, we can, in fact, shine light into an area thousands of miles away, and we know we have impact because we know it's all connected and interconnected, interrelated. In doing so, I no longer feel powerless or hopeless, because Terry said earlier, I get to choose. I get to choose to shine light or not. And perhaps that experience that comes along my path that makes me realize, oh, I'm not so loving at the moment, is the very catalyst and opportunity to evolve that understanding of myself. And every time we do this, we make this earth a little bit more loving and a little bit more peaceful, because we're actually doing it from within, not expecting the external to behave a certain way to make us happy. We do it, and then it just flows out.
Wonderful. Yep. And as you were saying before, we are here on this earth. We've chosen to come here to have this human experience. We still have to go about the experiencing part, and we're going to run into things that trip us up, make me angry, sad, whatever. But right, it's the trick of catching it. No, okay,
loving it.
Okay, I was angry. Now that's over. Let's go back to love, and I can learn from that. I can do whatever with it, but I don't need to stay with whatever that low vibrational feeling was. That's the trick. Just have the experience, but don't live there. Learn from it, let it go, and back to love.
And
one of the questions I've asked from the very I was going to say, one of the questions I've asked from the very beginning to people that have never even touched this concept before, because in fact, for most of humanity, this is not in any way in their radar.
Right.
It's just really not. I mean, they're so externally focused, and rightfully so, trying to, take care of their families, take care of their community, doing all the things that they are aware that they're here to participate. And that is actually valid in its own right. One of the questions that I've had to ask myself is, do I love myself unconditionally? And is one of the questions that I've asked when the opportunities have been appropriate to others. And it is, especially for people that have never touched this, it's one of my favorite, because I love to talk to people who've never touched this, because that's that crack moment like I had, where you get that crack, and when you know that life is going to become, you leave port 1 degree and your destination thousands of miles away is far different than you ever expected. Mm-hmm. So asking the question of, do you love yourself unconditionally? For one, most people, when I ask that, have never even heard a question like that. 2, don't have no outer reason to understand that question. And yet, number 3, all of them instantly understand that question. And then it's a process sometimes of, well, no, like, when would you like to love yourself? Well, I'm working on it. Well, that's fine. When is the moment to live? Now. So you're telling me next Tuesday you will have worked at it hard enough, by next Tuesday you can answer the question. And I'm like, well, no, probably be the Tuesday after that. And I'm like, but that Tuesday 2 weeks from now is now. And right now is now. So my next question is, if you were ever going to love yourself unconditionally, when would be the best time? Right now. And then there's the, I'm like, well, let's take it down a notch. Do you like yourself? Well, yeah, okay. And you work around that, and eventually you come to a point, there's no more denying the fact that, oh, I am really genuinely a lovable person. It makes no difference what age, size, shape, anything about us. No matter if we killed our parents 3 days ago, it really doesn't matter. That essence is that essence of recognizing I love myself unconditionally. The moment we can embrace that, we now have in this lifetime loved ourselves unconditionally, if for not just one moment, which means we can always come back to it as we explore life and we don't love ourselves unconditionally. We can always say, wait a minute, I did this once before. I can do it again. And then you do that over and over and over again. All of a sudden, it becomes an innate aspect of who we are. And I love that part of it, because we're not here to preach to the choir. We're not here to preach to anybody. We're just here to remind people that we're all magnificent beings on this precious planet. That's all there is to it. Now, what you want to do with that magnificence is entirely up to you. I know what I'm doing with mine.
Oh, me too.
That was beautiful.
So beautiful. Oh, my goodness. And, to me, love is an action word. So we do show people what love is by the acts that we do, by the energy that we put forth. And, I loved how you said, Harold, that just being here makes a difference. It does, because the energy that we're putting out from ourselves, whether that's high vibration love energy or it's down at the bottom of the barrel fear energy, it makes a difference. It goes into that big soup of all the energy that is. And so we're either raising the vibration or we're lowering it. There is no
and to go down to the rabbit hole for just a moment, in the broader spectrum, this will stretch most people's credulity, is even the most horrific and seemingly least desirable, perhaps most violent or most unkind or most hateful or most devious or most vengeful murderers, whatever, they have a place on the planet right now too, because in their presence, in their choices, they afford countless others an opportunity to say, wait a minute, that doesn't seem right. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, their very presence on the planet can be a catapult for a lot of people to choose kindness and compassion, because they see the depths of the lowest emotional response. And in doing so, they've actually provided, as you've already said, Jim, I'm going kind of an extreme version of this, but everybody is a master teacher in our pathway, whether we like it or not. And it's more of like what crosses our paths and how we interact with it can be a wonderful opportunity to choose differently. And it's also kind of interesting. For example, we have a mutual friend in another city that when we lived there, we all knew this person. And it's interesting because it kind of came through my parents. My mother knew her one way, then my father knows this lady another way, and then I know her my own way. And it's been fascinating over the years to watch how each of them have evoked almost completely different experiences from the same lady. So depending on where this attention is, this lady goes there with my mother. Depending on where my father's attention is, he evokes a very, and I want to say more lower negative vibrational things. And then when I interact with the same lady and myself, I invoke a whole different aspect of her, that where she actually has been a wonderful, with her meager means, has actually supported the Love Foundation any way she can. And she loves to send a small check, for Global Love Day, just to acknowledge it. And I'm like, because I can see the contrast of three experiences of three individuals evoking responses, same person, but each one not only shows an opportunity of how we could take it higher, it also shows that within her, she does actually understand unconditional love, because conceptually she's attracted to and supports what I've been about and what we do, while simultaneously, spends a lot of her time watching news and getting involved in all the negativity. And again, that's an example of how expressive our realities are, how multidimensional, how multifaceted. And it's really us that's evoking the responses. So when we're having experiences, really, if it's not a comfortable experience, we don't have to chastise ourselves. We can just quietly either remove ourselves or say, what is this that I'm reacting to? Why is it not feeling comfortable? And can I shift my vibration, or have we just gone too far? Maybe I'll come back tomorrow. Let me just leave now. I'll come back tomorrow in a different place and see if I can come into a different reality. Well, all of a sudden you start to realize that life is nothing the way we've been taught by our parents and our grandparents and the schools and systems and governments and religions, on and on and on. You get to explore it for yourself. And that is just amazing.
That's what we always do have a choice.
Always.
And that was not a concept that anybody really ever gave. I think, American centric again, because a lot of, we're living here. The American centric aspect is, create your dreams. And that's actually a very laudable envision intention. But create your dreams at all costs, not so much. And whose dream are we actually trying to create? I mean, I can see the red Ferrari going to the highway and say, ooh, everybody has that. I want that. And I sit back, I'm like, do I really want that?
Right.
I don't want to ride on the street. I don't want my, and all of a sudden it's like, that isn't defining me. Now, if I have it, great. If I don't have it, great. What do I choose? And that there's some beautiful carpenters that would have been fantastic lawyers. And there's some lawyers that should be harpists, so it's like, but why do we do things? And it takes courage. And I think three of us can attest to this. It does take a self-courage to step off of the paradigm that we've lived and to, make ourselves certifiable in a little funny farm room and say, look, I'm looking at life very differently. And I'm okay with that.
Right.
Because we do then start to look very different to other people, even though we still can interact with them. Our perspectives are often more silent or more general or more compassionate or kind or more quietly stepping away. We start to interact because their buttons are no longer affecting us in the ways that they might have in the past. And in that, then we find our paths crossing new people, like today, an opportunity to share in yet a new combination. So you take a simple concept like agape love, and through conversation, we've just shot off all kinds of new ideas based on our personal journeys. And I think collectively, we've just created a whole new burst, like a supernova of new potentials that we won't even know for days and years to come what exactly a conversation like this has actually spurred in each of us to explore more.
Yeah. And in those that may have never heard any of this before. So that's the beauty of it. And wow, you guys, look at this. It feels like we just got started and we spent an hour discussing love.
Harold talked
Amazing.
a lot. I'll admit it.
Thank you, Harold.
I think we have to do this again. I really do.
Well, Global Update is coming up. We can do an encore performance on Global Update.
Yes, I love that idea.
Let's see where we all are. The three of us. Let's see where we all are come May 1st of this year.
Let's do it. I'm up for that. Oh, thank you both. Thank you so much for being
such
here.
a pleasure.
And if somebody wants to discuss this more with either of you, both of you, how do they find you? What's a good place for them to look up Harold Becker or Jim Mershon?
Harold Becker is quite findable, and particularly the Love Foundation, thelovefoundation.com, and any of the social sites. Look for the Love Foundation. We come up pretty much everywhere, and I encourage anybody to reach out. I always enjoy meeting new old brothers and sisters in the pathway, and reconnecting with them in this lifetime and saying, oh, where are you at in this journey, and what do you have to share as your gift of life? But thelovefoundation.com is really probably the easiest to find us.
Great. Thank you. And Jim's just a guy.
I'm just, I
Guy.com.
I have to get an email that I'm changing my email now. But so should anyone want to contact me, it's simply james.qhht@gmail.com.
Fairly simple. Thank you, both of you. And thank you to our audience today that was here. Karen Palmer was with us. I know, Harold, she was instrumental in me connecting with you. And thank you, Karen, for that. And Marisol, Robin, Jean, Erica, Charlie, thank you all for coming in and joining the conversation today. Come back next week. We'll have something. Karen actually will be with me next week.
Oh,
Karen
cool.
and Kathleen Caputo, who, both of you, I know that you've met her, Jim. Harold, you would love our Kathleen Caputo. She studied with Dr. Emoto. And so she has done a lot, especially for children, in helping them understand unconditional love. And
we have a Global Love Day crystal from Emoto. Dr. Emoto and I actually got to spend personal time with him when he was in Tampa. So,
oh gosh, I'll connect you and Kathleen if you'd like. Yeah,
we made him a Love Ambassador to the Love Foundation.
Yeah,
prior to his passing.
Awesome. All right, so we are going to get out of here. Thank you all for spending some time with us. And come back to the Peapod. We always have a good time here. And you saw how excited we got about love. There's other topics we can get excited about too. So thank you so much for being here. Stay in your heart, stay blessed, and Namaste, y'all. Bye, everyone.